I am 34 years old, and my husband Mark is 35. We had been married for 6 years, and for the most part, they were good years. The only real point of friction in our lives was his mother, Carol. She wasn't a monster, not in the way you read about in stories. She was just difficult. After my father-in-law passed away, Carol had become increasingly lonely. She filled her days with television and phone calls to her friends, recounting the same stories over and over. She was proud, stubborn, and had a deep-seated belief that she was always, unequivocally, right about everything. This belief had served her well enough in her life, but it was about to become a very expensive problem. The problem started quietly. It started with a man named David. David was, according to Carol, an engineer working on an oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico. He was handsome, worldly, and tragically widowed, just like her. He had found her on a social media site for people over 60. At first, it was sweet. Carol would have a little smile on her face as she texted on her phone. She would blush when we asked who she was talking to. It seemed harmless, a little bit of happiness for a lonely woman. I was happy for her. Mark was thrilled. He saw his mother coming back to life, and it made him immensely happy. My first inkling of trouble came a few weeks into this whirlwind online romance. We were over at her house for our weekly Sunday dinner. Carol was talking about David, as she always did. "He is having such a bad time on that rig," she said, shaking her head with sympathy. "His satellite phone broke, and he cannot call his daughter in England. He feels so isolated." Mark nodded along, murmuring something about how tough that must be. I asked a simple question. "Can't the company provide him with a new one?" I said. Carol's face tightened. "It is not that simple, Laura," she said, her tone sharp. "There is so much red tape." He said it would be weeks. He needed to buy one from a special supplier. A little alarm bell went off in my head. It was a tiny, quiet sound, but it was there. I decided to let it go. Maybe it was complicated. I didn't know anything about oil rigs. Later that week, Carol mentioned it again. "I helped David out," she said, a proud little smile on her face. "I sent him a little money so he could get a new phone and talk to his daughter. It was the least I could do." I asked her how much. "Oh, just a few $100s," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "It is nothing." It made me feel good to help. Mark squeezed my hand under the table, a clear signal to drop it. He shot me a look that said, "Let her be happy." I did. But the little alarm bell was ringing a bit louder now. The source of this money was what worried me the most. After her husband died, Carol had sold their large family home. It was too much for her to keep up on her own. The sale had left her with a very comfortable nest egg. It was meant to last for the rest of her life. It was her security, her independence. Seeing her chip away at it for a man she had never met felt wrong. It felt dangerous. I tried to talk to Mark about it that night as we drove home. "Don't you think it's a little strange?" I asked. "Sending money to a man he's only known for a month?" Mark sighed, his hands tight on the steering wheel. "Laura, it is her money," he said. "She is a grown woman. If spending a few $100s makes her feel happy and connected to someone, what is the harm? She has been so lonely since Dad died." I wanted to argue, to tell him that this was how these things started, with small amounts. But I could see it was a losing battle. He wanted to see his mother happy, and he was willing to overlook the red flags to maintain that reality. The requests for money did not stop. They escalated. A month later, it was a problem with customs. David had supposedly sent her a lavish gift, a box of jewelry and designer perfumes, to thank her for her kindness. But the package was stuck in a port in a foreign country. "He needs $2,000 to clear the customs fees," Carol explained over the phone. Her voice was frantic. "The official is being very difficult. David is so upset. He wanted to do something nice for me, and now it is a nightmare." This time, I did not stay quiet. "Carol, that does not sound right," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and even. "That sounds like a scam. You should not send any more money." The reaction was immediate and explosive. "How dare you?" she hissed. "You do not know anything about David. You are just cynical. You have always been jealous of any happiness I find." The accusation stung, mostly because it was so untrue. I just wanted her to be safe. I am not jealous, I said. I am worried. This is a classic scam tactic, Carol, she hung up on me. When I told Mark what had happened, he was angry with me. Why did you do that? He demanded. You know how sensitive she is. Now you have upset her for no reason. For no reason? I shot back. Mark, she is about to send $2,000 to a stranger for a package that probably does not exist. You do not know that, he said, his voice rising. It is her money, Laura. We have to respect her choices. It was the first major fight we had had in years. We slept in separate rooms that night. The line had been drawn. It was me against Carol and her mysterious, expensive boyfriend. And my own husband was on her side. I knew I could not let it go. This was not just about a few $1,000s anymore. It was about protecting Carol from herself. It was about protecting the future, because I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that when her money ran out, she would be on our doorstep. And we would be the ones left to pick up the pieces of her broken heart and her empty bank account. The next Sunday, dinner was tense. Carol was polite but cold. She pointedly did not mention David's name in front of me. She talked about everything else under the sun, her garden, her friends, a television show she was watching. It was a deliberate exclusion. Later, while I was helping her clear the dishes, Mark was in the living room watching a football game. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She picked it up, and her whole face softened. I knew it was him. She turned her back to me, trying to be discreet as she typed out a reply. I tried one more time, a different approach. Carol, I said gently, I am sorry if I upset you last week. I just care about you and I worry. She did not look at me. She kept her eyes on her phone. I appreciate your concern, Laura, she said, her voice stiff. But it is misplaced. David is a good man. He is just having a string of bad luck. I saw my opening and I took it. What kind of bad luck? I asked. She hesitated, then seemed to decide there was no harm in telling me. His daughter in England, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. She was in a terrible accident. She is in the hospital, and he needs money for her medical bills. The insurance over there is not very good. My heart sank. This was another classic. The sick relative. The emergency that required immediate, untraceable funds. How much does he need? I asked, dreading the answer. $10,000, she said. My hand, which was holding a plate, froze in midair. You cannot send him that much money. Please. Let's just talk to a financial advisor, or even the police. They have departments for this kind of thing. She finally turned to look at me, and her eyes were filled with a fiery indignation. The police? She scoffed. Why would I involve the police in a private family matter? This is for his daughter. Do you have any idea how cruel you sound? It is not cruel to be careful, I insisted. He is asking for a huge amount of money. Have you even spoken to him on the phone? Have you seen him on a video call? She lifted her chin defiantly. His camera is broken on the oil rig, she said. And the connection is too poor for voice calls. We communicate through text. It is more romantic anyway. I felt like I was talking to a brick wall. Every logical point I made was met with a romantic excuse. Every red flag I pointed out was woven into the tragic, compelling story of her long-distance love. She wanted to believe it so badly that she was immune to reason. I went back to the living room, defeated. Mark looked up from the game. Is everything okay? He asked. I just shook my head. I did not have the energy to fight with him about it again. I knew he would just tell me to let it go, to respect her choices. But her choices were leading her off a cliff. The catalyst, the moment that pushed me from worried daughter-in-law to amateur detective, came a week later. I had stopped by Carol's house to drop off some library books she had asked for. She was not home, but she had told me she would leave the back door unlocked. I let myself in and put the books on the kitchen table. As I was about to leave, I saw it. Lying next to her purse on the counter was a bank statement that had been pulled from the envelope. It was face up. I know I should not have looked. I know it was an invasion of her privacy. But I could not stop myself. My eyes scanned the page, and my blood ran cold. There it was, in stark black and white. A wire transfer. The recipient's name was unfamiliar. The bank was in a country I had never heard of. But the amount was sickeningly clear.
$62,000. $62,000.
It was a huge portion of her retirement fund. It was more than the down payment on her house. It was a life-altering amount of money, sent to a man she had never met, a man whose camera was conveniently broken. This was not a small loan for a phone or a few thousand for a fake customs fee. This was financial suicide. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The frustration and worry hardened into a cold, clear resolve. She would not listen to me. Mark would not listen to me. So, I would have to find a way to make them see the truth. I had to prove that David was not who he said he was. I took out my phone, and I took a picture of the bank statement. It felt wrong, but I knew I might need it as proof. I left her house, my heart pounding in my chest. The game had changed. I was no longer just offering advice. I was going on the offensive. My first step was to confront her directly, but with a different strategy. I could not just accuse her anymore. I had to come at it from a place of feigned concern for the logistics. I called her that evening. "Hi, Carol," I said, my voice as bright and friendly as I could manage. "I was just thinking about David. It must be so exciting that he's planning to come here soon." She was immediately suspicious. "What about it?" she asked. "Well, with that much money you have sent him, I was just thinking about his plans," I said. "Is he going to pay you back once he gets here and has access to his own accounts?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Of course he is," she said, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. "He is a very honorable man. He has a lot of money tied up in investments. The situation on the rig just makes it difficult to access." "That makes sense," I said, trying to sound agreeable. "I just worry about you, that is all. $60,000 is a lot of money to be without." The line went silent again. I had said the number out loud. I had let her know that I knew. "How did you know that amount?" she finally whispered, her voice a mixture of fear and anger. "I saw a bank statement on your counter when I dropped off your books," I admitted. "I was not snooping, it was just there." "Carol, I am terrified for you." The dam of her composure broke. "You are snooping," she shrieked. "That is my private financial information. You have no right. This is none of your business. You are trying to sabotage my relationship because you are a miserable, jealous person." The insults rained down on me, each one designed to hurt and push me away. But this time, they did not work. I was too focused. "I am not jealous," I said calmly. "I am trying to prevent your financial ruin. This man is a scammer. Get out of my life," she screamed and slammed the phone down. I immediately called Mark and told him what had happened. I expected him to be angry with me for looking at her statement and for confronting her. And he was, at first. "Laura, you cannot just go through her private papers," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "I did not go through them. It was right there," I insisted. "And that is not the point. The point is that she sent $60,000 to this guy. Your mother is being scammed out of her entire life savings." I sent him the picture of the bank statement. The digital image, cold and impersonal, seemed to shake him in a way my frantic words had not. He was quiet for a long time. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay, this is bad. This is really bad." It was the first crack in his wall of denial. He was not on my side yet, but he was no longer entirely on hers either. He agreed to talk to her with me. We went over to her house the next day. The atmosphere was icy. Carol sat on her sofa, with her arms crossed, refusing to look at either of us. Mark did the talking. He was gentle, much more gentle than I had been. "Mom," he started. "Laura told me about the money. We are worried. We love you, and we do not want to see you get hurt." Carol sniffled, a single tear rolling down her cheek. "You do not love me," she said, her voice thick with self-pity. "You just want my money. You are worried about your inheritance." The accusation was so vile, so completely out of left field, that it left us both speechless. Mark recovered first. "Mom, that is not true, and you know it," he said, his voice firm. "We do not care about the money for ourselves. We care about it for you. That is your retirement. What are you going to do when it is all gone? It will not be all gone, she insisted. David is going to pay me back, with interest. He is a wealthy man. This is just a temporary cash flow problem for him. It was hopeless. She had an answer for everything. An excuse for every inconsistency. A romantic justification for every glaring red flag. We left her house that day feeling more defeated than ever. Mark was shaken. I do not understand, he said as we got in the car. How can she not see it? It is so obvious, because she does not want to see it, I said. She is lonely, and this man is telling her everything she wants to hear. Admitting he is a scammer means admitting she was a fool. Her pride will not let her do that. It was then that I knew I had to go further. Talking was not working. Presenting logical arguments was not working. I needed hard, irrefutable proof. I needed to find the real David. That night, I sat down at my computer and began my investigation. I started with the photos. Carol had, in a moment of pride early on, forwarded me a few of the pictures David had sent her. They showed a handsome, silver-haired man with kind eyes. He was pictured on a boat, in front of a fancy car, and in what looked like a luxurious office. I saved the images to my desktop and then uploaded them to a reverse image search engine. The results came back in less than a second. My heart pounded as I clicked the first link. The man in the photos was not an oil rig engineer named David. He was a German model and actor named Klaus Richter. His photos were all over the internet, on stock photo websites, in advertisements for men's cologne, and on his public social media profiles. The pictures David had sent were stolen. I felt a surge of triumph. This was it. This was the proof I needed. I immediately called Mark over to the computer. Look, I said, pointing at the screen. This is your mom's David. He stared at the screen, his face pale. He clicked through the links, looking at the dozens of photos of Klaus Richter, a man who was very clearly not hiding out on an oil rig. So he used a fake picture, Mark said slowly. The denial was so deeply ingrained in him, it was astonishing. Maybe he is just shy about his real appearance. Mom says he is very humble. I could not believe what I was hearing. Shy, I exclaimed. Mark, he is not shy. He is a liar. He has built this entire relationship on a fake identity. This is the proof we need to show your mom. He shook his head. She will just make an excuse, he said, his voice heavy with resignation. She will say he did it because he wanted her to love him for his soul, not his looks. You do not understand how deep this goes for her. This will not be enough. He was right, and I knew it. A fake photo was not enough. She would find a way to rationalize it. I needed something more. I needed to find the person who was actually typing the messages, the person who had received the $60,000. I started digging deeper. I searched for forums and support groups for victims of romance scams. I found dozens of them. As I read through the stories, a chilling pattern emerged. The oil rig engineer, the broken equipment, the customs fees, the sick relative. Story after story, it was the same script, almost word for word. They were all talking to the same person, or at least the same criminal organization. I spent hours, night after night, reading these heartbreaking accounts. Women and men who had lost everything. Their life savings, their homes, their dignity. They shared details of their scammers, the email addresses they used, the phone numbers, the names. I started a spreadsheet, cross-referencing every little piece of information. I felt like I was hunting a ghost. For a week, I found nothing that connected directly to Carol's case. The names were different, the email addresses did not match. I was starting to lose hope. I felt consumed by it. I was not sleeping well. I was distant with Mark. My whole life had become about this secret, obsessive quest. I talked to my best friend, Jessica, about it over coffee. She was the only person besides Mark who knew the full extent of the situation. You look exhausted, she said, her brow furrowed with concern. This is eating you alive, Laura. I have to do this, Jess, I said, stirring my latte. I cannot just stand by and watch her throw her life away. And Mark, he is trying, but he is still so afraid of confronting her in a way that will really break through. "So, what is your next move?" she asked. "I do not know," I admitted. "I have hit a wall. I have proof the photos are fake, but it is not enough. I need something more concrete." Jessica tapped her finger on the table, thinking. "What about the bank transfer?" she said. "You have the information from a statement. The recipient's name, the bank."
Can you do anything with that?
It was a good idea. I had been so focused on the online persona that I had neglected the most important part, the money trail. That night, I went back to the picture of the bank statement. I started researching the recipient's bank. It was a small, obscure bank in a country known for its lax financial regulations. It was a dead end. The recipient's name was likely fake as well. It felt like another door slamming in my face. I was back on the scam victim forums, scrolling through pages of posts, my eyes burning from the screen. I was about to give up for the night when I saw it. A new post from a woman in Florida. Her story was eerily similar to Carol's. An oil rig engineer, a proposal, a request for a large sum of money for a business investment. But it was one detail that made me sit bolt upright. She posted the email address her scammer used. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was the same one Carol had been emailing. The exact same one. My hands were shaking as I read the rest of the woman's post. Her name was Brenda. She had lost over $100,000. But she had not just given up. She had hired a private investigator. The investigator had worked with international law enforcement agencies and had managed to trace the criminal network. They had identified several of the key players. Brenda wrote that she wanted to share this information to prevent other women from falling victim. And then, at the bottom of her post, she uploaded a file. It was a photograph. I clicked on it. My breath caught in my throat. It was a mugshot. A grainy, black and white police photograph of a man in his late 20s. He had a sullen expression and tired eyes. He looked nothing like the handsome German model. He was just a common criminal. Underneath the photo was his name and a list of his prior convictions for fraud and extortion. This was him. This was the man who had charmed my mother-in-law, the man who had stolen her security. This was the real David. This was the key. This was the irrefutable proof. This was not something Carol could explain away with a romantic excuse. This was not a shy man using a fake photo. This was a criminal. A real-life, arrested, convicted criminal. I printed the mugshot, my hands still trembling. I printed Brenda's story from the forum. I printed the articles about Klaus Richter, the model. I gathered it all into a folder. I finally had the ammunition I needed. Now, I just needed to figure out how to use it. I did not show it to Mark right away. I needed a plan first. Just showing this to Carol would result in the same cycle of screaming and denial. She would accuse me of fabricating it. She would call me a liar. I needed to present it in a way that was undeniable, in a way that would force her to confront the ugly truth in a setting where she could not just run away or hang up the phone. The opportunity presented itself a few days later. Carol announced at our next Sunday dinner that she had big news. Mark and I exchanged a worried glance. "David has officially proposed," she declared, her eyes shining. She held out her hand to show us a ring. It was a gaudy, cheap-looking thing with a cloudy stone. He mailed it to me. He is making plans to leave the rig and come here to be with me. We are going to get married as soon as he arrives. The announcement hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Mark looked like he was going to be sick. This was escalating far beyond what even he had imagined. She was not just sending money anymore. She was planning a life with a phantom. She was talking about redecorating the guest room, about what kind of wedding dress she would wear. She was living in a complete fantasy, and she was about to crash into a brutal reality. I knew then what I had to do. It was cruel. It was theatrical. But it was the only thing I could think of that would be powerful enough to shatter her delusion. Valentine's Day was in 2 weeks. It was the perfect stage. That night, after we left her house, I finally showed Mark the folder. I laid it all out on the kitchen table. The pictures of the model. The story from the woman in Florida. And finally, the mugshot. I placed it in the center of the table. "Mark," I said, my voice quiet but firm. This is him. This is the real David. This is the man your mother is planning to marry. He stared at the mugshot for a long, long time. All the color drained from his face. He picked up the piece of paper, his hand shaking slightly. He read the man's name, his list of crimes. The denial he had clung to for so long finally crumbled into dust. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Oh my God. What has she done?" He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of horror and despair. "What are we going to do?" he asked, his voice cracking. "We cannot just show this to her. She will lose her mind." "I know," I said. "I have a plan. But you have to trust me. And you have to back me up no matter what." He looked from the mugshot to my face. He saw the resolve in my eyes. He nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "I trust you. What is the plan?" The next 2 weeks were a strange sort of limbo. We had to pretend that everything was normal. We had to listen to Carol gush about her upcoming wedding, about the romantic messages David was sending her in preparation for their first Valentine's Day together. It was sickening. Every word out of her mouth was a testament to the scammer's skill. He had hooked her completely. She was living for the validation she got from his texts, the promises of a future that would never happen. I went to a home goods store during my lunch break one day. I walked through the aisles until I found the picture frame section. I searched for the most garish, over-the-top, romantic frame I could find. I settled on a large, silver-plated frame in the shape of a heart, with little cherubs and roses embossed all over it. It was perfect. I went home and printed the mugshot again, this time on high-quality photo paper. I wanted every detail to be clear. The dead eyes, the prison jumpsuit, the booking number printed at the bottom. I carefully cut it to size and fitted it into the heart-shaped frame. It was a grotesque juxtaposition, the symbol of love and romance, holding the face of a cold, hard criminal. I wrapped the frame in shiny red paper and tied it with a big, elaborate white bow. It looked like a genuine, heartfelt Valentine's gift. All that was left was to wait for the day to arrive. We decided to host a small Valentine's dinner at our house. It was just going to be the four of us. Me, Mark, Carol, and Mark's sister, Sarah. Sarah was a gentle soul who hated conflict. She knew something was wrong with the David situation, but she had taken the path of least resistance, preferring to hope for the best rather than confront her mother. I knew her presence would be important. She was a neutral party, a witness. Carol arrived at our house in a flutter of excitement. She was wearing a red dress and had done her hair specially. She was glowing with a diluted happiness. "David sent me the most beautiful poem this morning," she announced as she handed me a bottle of wine. "He is so incredibly romantic. I am the luckiest woman in the world." Dinner was agonizing. I pushed food around on my plate, my stomach in knots. Mark was quiet and tense, speaking only when spoken to. Sarah tried to make cheerful small talk, but it kept falling flat. The only person at the table who was enjoying herself was Carol. She talked about David nonstop. David's favorite color. The kind of food David liked. The plans they had to travel the world once he was free from that dreadful oil rig. With each word, I felt my resolve hardening. I was not just doing this for her anymore. I was doing it for us, for Mark, for the peace of our family that this fantasy was destroying. Finally, after we had finished dessert, I decided it was time. I stood up from the table. "Carol," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I have a Valentine's gift for you, too." She looked surprised and delighted. "Oh, Laura, you did not have to," she said, beaming at me. I went to the sideboard where I had placed the gift. I picked up the beautifully wrapped package and brought it back to the table. "I just thought, since you are so in love and planning a future together, you should have a nice picture of your man to keep on the mantel," I said, my words sweet as poison. I handed her the gift. She took it, her eyes shining with unshed tears of happiness. "How thoughtful of you," she whispered, clearly moved by my gesture. "After all our disagreements, this means so much to me." She began to unwrap it, carefully, savoring the moment. Mark was holding his breath. Sarah was watching with a confused smile. The room was silent except for the sound of tearing paper. She pulled the frame out of the wrapping paper. For a second, she just stared at it, her smile frozen on her face. Her brain seemed to be struggling to process what it was seeing. The heart shape, the cherubs, the face in the middle. The face of a criminal. Her smile faltered. It slid off her face like a mask. Her complexion went from a happy flush to a sickly, pale gray. "What is this?" she whispered. Her voice was a bare thread of sound. It was trembling. I looked her directly in the eye. My voice was calm and clear, with no trace of malice or triumph. Just flat, undeniable fact. "That is David," I said. "That is the man you sent $60,000 to. His name is not David. He is a criminal from another country. The picture he sent you was of a German model." She shook her head, a tiny, jerky movement.
"No," she said. "No."
"This is a joke. A cruel, vicious joke. You did this. You faked this to hurt me. You have always been jealous of me." The accusation started again, the same old tired lines. But this time, they had no power. They were the desperate thrashing of a drowning woman. Before I could even respond, Mark spoke up. His voice was strong, stronger than I had ever heard it when speaking to his mother. "Mom, it is true," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "It is all true. We have the proof. Here are the websites with the real man's photos. Here are the forums with other women he has scammed, telling the exact same story you told us. The oil rig, the sick daughter, everything. It is a script, Mom. A script they used to steal money." He handed her the phone. Her hands were shaking so badly, she could barely hold it. She scrolled through the evidence, her eyes wide with horror. Sarah just sat there, her mouth hanging open, looking back and forth between all of us. She was utterly shocked into silence. Carol looked up from the phone. She looked at the mugshot in the heart-shaped frame. She looked at Mark's grim face. She looked at my calm, unyielding expression. And in that moment, the fantasy shattered. The elaborate, beautiful castle of lies she had built in her mind came crashing down, and she was left sitting in the rubble, exposed and humiliated. She did not scream. She did not yell. She just made a small, wounded sound, like an animal in pain. Then she covered her face with her hands and began to sob. It was not the sound of a broken heart. It was not the sound of sadness for a lost love. It was the raw, ugly sound of pure, unadulterated shame. The truth had finally hit her, not as a gentle realization, but as a public execution. And we all sat there, in the wreckage, listening to her weep. The aftermath was as messy and painful as I had expected. Carol did not speak a single word to me for 2 months. When she did speak to me, it was only in clipped, necessary sentences. The warmth, even the contentious, difficult warmth that had been there before, was gone. It was replaced by a cold, brittle formality. She had to go through the humiliating process of reporting the scam to the police and the bank. They told her what I already knew. The money was gone forever. There was virtually no chance of ever recovering it. The $60,000 had vanished into the ether of international crime. The financial consequences were severe. She could no longer afford the upkeep on her house. The nest egg that was supposed to see her through her old age was critically depleted. Within 6 months, she had to sell the house she had lived in for 40 years and move into a small, one-bedroom apartment in a senior living complex. It was clean and safe, but it was a stark, daily reminder of her mistake. It was a monument to her gullibility. Mark and I helped her move. The process was strained and silent. While I was packing up her living room, I saw the heart-shaped frame I had given her sitting on top of a trash can. The glass cracked. I felt a strange pang, not of guilt, but of grim finality. The symbol of her delusion was being thrown away with the rest of the garbage. My relationship with Mark, however, was transformed for the better. The night of the Valentine's dinner, after his mother and sister had left, he pulled me into a hug and did not let go for a long time. "I am so sorry," he whispered into my hair. "I am so sorry I did not listen to you. I was so scared of upsetting her, of facing the truth, that I let it get this far." I let you handle it all alone. You were trying to protect her, and I treated you like you were the enemy. It was the apology I did not know I needed to hear. His denial had been hurtful. It had made me feel isolated and crazy. His apology, his complete and total validation of my actions, healed that wound. Our marriage became stronger. A new foundation of trust was laid, one where my judgment was respected and my concerns were heard. He never second-guessed my intuition again. His sister, Sarah, called me a few days after the incident. Her voice was full of remorse. "Laura, I am so sorry," she said. "I knew something was wrong. I knew it in my gut. But I was a coward. I did not want to rock the boat. I did not want Mom to be mad at me. You were the only one brave enough to do what had to be done. It was brutal, but it was necessary. You saved her from losing everything." Her words were another small vindication. The enablers, the ones who had prioritized a fragile peace over the hard truth, now saw the error of their ways. The family dynamic had been irrevocably altered. The unspoken rule had always been, "Do not upset Mom." I had broken that rule in the most spectacular way possible, and in doing so, I had created a new, healthier one. We will not allow delusion to destroy us. Life settled into a new normal. We still saw Carol for holidays and birthdays. The conversations were stilted and focused on safe, impersonal topics. The weather, television shows, her new neighbors. She never mentioned David's name again. She never spoke of the money. It was a black hole in our family history, a subject we all tacitly agreed to orbit, but never enter. She was a diminished figure. The proud, unshakable certainty she once possessed was gone, replaced by a quiet, wounded caution. She was more hesitant, more willing to listen, but also more distant. In saving her from the scammer, I had also killed the vibrant, if foolish, woman she had briefly become. I had forced her to look at her own foolishness, and the shame of that was a wall between us that would likely never come down. Sometimes, I wonder if there was a gentler way I could have handled it, a kinder way to deliver the truth. But every time I play it back in my mind, I come to the same conclusion. She was in too deep. Her pride was too strong. Any gentle attempt would have been deflected. Any quiet conversation would have been dismissed. She needed a shock to the system. She needed the theatrical, undeniable, humiliating reality of that mugshot in that ridiculous heart frame. It was a cruel gift, but it was the one that set her free from a lie that would have cost her everything. She never thanked me, and I never expected her to. But I knew, in the cold and quiet space that now existed between us, that she had learned her lesson. She finally learned what it felt like to be wrong. And I learned that sometimes protecting the people you love means you have to be willing to hurt them. Some lessons, once learned, are permanent. The silence between us was the price of her security, and it was a price I was willing to pay.